Good morning, Dr. DiRienzo. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Welcome to the show. And before we dive in, how was your workout?
It was great. I did a spin class just now. I try to go do that a couple of times a week. I really enjoy it.
Oh, that's a good workout. That I took one a long time ago and it really relaxed me at the end. I felt so good after I took it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this morning I was getting ready and while I was getting ready, my blow dryer decided to stop working.
Oh, well, your hair looks great.
Well, thank you. I had to use the guest one, and it's not as high power. I have very thick hair, and I usually use a Dyson. I don't know what happened, but bad timing. So the other one
Oh,
didn't blow as hard, but that's okay. It seems to have worked out. But it's like, why now? Why couldn't this wait till
right.
tomorrow? So
That's life, isn't it?
yeah. So let's jump in. And why don't you tell us a little about your background and what motivated you to pursue a career in naturopathy? And is this something you always wanted to do?
Sure. Yeah. I love um, talking about my pathway to getting where I am today. So I was one of those kids that was really directed and knew I wanted to be in medicine from as early as high school. That was my direction. And I went to college with that intent and took the classes to be pre-med. And then in undergraduate school, I worked on an ambulance for my time there. It's really neat in Burlington, Vermont, where University of Vermont is located. The school actually has an ambulance squad that services all of campus and all of what is considered South Burlington. And then we back up actual Burlington proper with the fire department. So I did that for my 4 years there and really enjoyed it and thought that I would go into emergency medicine based on my experience there. Um, and as life would happen, I ended up deciding that I knew I wanted to be also a mom and have a family. And I started thinking that maybe emergency medicine wasn't going to be the best fit lifestyle wise. And also, at the same time, I happened to meet a naturopathic doctor in Burlington. And so my last year of college, I totally pivoted and shadowed her the summer after I graduated and just really fell in love with preventative medicine and wellness care. It's
Yeah.
the totally opposite end of the spectrum from piecing somebody back together from a car accident and just stabilizing them enough to get to, emergency care. The complete opposite end of the spectrum of teaching people about their bodies, focusing on health and wellness, and really thinking more about longevity. So, from that preceptorship that I did in Burlington, I learned about naturopathic medical school, which is its own separate entity. So most people probably heard of MDs. Those are, a lot of the medical schools in this country train allopathic MDs. And then there's also medical schools that give the degree of Doctor of Osteopathy. Those are the DOs. They're not as many at schools, but I'm sure most people are aware of that designation. And then naturopathic medicine is yet its own other third entity, and it consists of 4 years of medical school after an undergrad degree in pre-med, and then we do a residency in family medicine. And the biggest difference is that there's no surgical specialty. It really ends at primary care. It's only a primary care type of medical practice. I refer out to all kinds of specialists when that's appropriate, but my training and the paradigm is to offer people primary care and alternatives for in the primary care setting. So we do complementary medicine, the best of both worlds. I do prescribe drugs, but I also always talk to people about diet and lifestyle and herbal medicine and nutrition, using nutrition as supplements in an amount that would be more than you could physically consume. So using supplements to as adjuncts to a good diet, and kind of creating, like I said, a complementary plan for people that could include the combination of natural and conventional medicines.
And so it's holistic.
It is holistic. The goal is to try to treat the whole person, not just symptom treatment. I mean, of course, sometimes that's important too. If your blood pressure is 200 over 100, you need to treat the blood pressure and,
Right.
and address what's most important. But yes, I spend more time with people and I try to really get to root cause. That's a big focus of naturopathic medicine. What at the root is creating the imbalance. And again, using blood pressure as an example, there's a variety of issues. It could be genetic factors, it could be poor diet, it could be really high stress, it could be sleep apnea, just to name a few. But it's really nice to be able to try to treat the whole person rather than just symptom management, which unfortunately in our country, conventional medicine has kind of adopted that model where, spending just a few minutes with someone, you're limited to what you can accomplish and you can only really achieve symptom care.
Yeah. And also, you can only go in now with just one thing at a time.
Yeah, correct. And I see a lot of people really frustrated by that. They want to, who only has one specific thing, right? It's like, well, my sleep's not super great. And I think I'm heading towards maybe menopause, and I occasionally feel tired or more tired than I want. And yeah, we want to talk about how we feel holistically, not just one symptom.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's a real demand because of that.
Yeah. It's hard when you have three or four things and you have to pick one.
Right? And be told that you can just reschedule at a later date to talk about your second or third concerns.
Yeah. And then it's like, but you can't get in for 2 months. So hold on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's
so,
another huge issue.
yeah, it is. So I know from going to you for years, you do lab tests and you like doing specific lab tests, and you order them differently, or you have a different, I don't know, how do they differ from conventional physicians, the way they do the lab tests?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that I would say is that conventional medicine is very black or white. You're either in the range or you're out of the range, and that's it. And there's no really usually a lot more scrutinizing of lab values than just looking at anything that's been flagged abnormal. But the interesting thing is that reference ranges are derived from an average of the population. So there are either sick or at least not optimally well people that are contributing to how we get those reference ranges in the first place. So I have what I call kind of an optimal range for almost every value that we look at in the blood. So it's a little bit tighter reference range than just what's given by each lab. And, I think it's important to look at trends also. While you may be within the same range within a year time, it can swing greatly. And it's important to kind of notice those kinds of things as well. And then, of course, in my practice, there are such things as functional medicine labs that I use when we're not getting enough information or people are, having particular issues that, for instance, if their blood work all comes back not just normal, but pretty optimally well in my evaluation, but maybe they're still not sleeping well. We look at other things that are outside of conventional testing, like looking at adrenal hormones, for example, and trying to discover what other things we can we can address to help get the person back in balance and homeostasis.
So these are different blood panels than you would normally get. You said functional medicine. What do you mean by that?
Right. I mean, yes, functional medicine labs. What I mean by that is labs that are not a conventional blood test that is looking at things. The difference would be you can measure cortisol in blood, for example, and we do that. And again, going back to the conventional model, if you're in or out of the reference range, you fit the diagnostic criteria for either hyperadrenal function or hypo, and there's names for that, Cushing's and Addison's disease. But you, outside of having those disease states, cortisol varies throughout the day. And so having a blood draw just one point in time when the blood comes out of your body is not always adequate to kind of tell us how cortisol is responding and what the levels are doing. And so for people who they're not actually those two disease states, but maybe they've had a tremendous amount of stress and they're not sleeping and their levels are in the normal range, but staying high all day rather than having the nice curve that we would expect. You don't capture that on a blood draw. So there are some functional labs that do either hormone testing through saliva. Some of them are blood or other methods where we can look at more of really the function of each organ. So in the example of the adrenal, you're looking at cortisol morning, noon, afternoon, and evening to kind of map out what is the state of health of the adrenal glands over the course of the day, not just the one point in time blood draw.
Interesting. And I was just thinking about the blood sugar test versus A1C. Can you talk
Right.
about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Blood sugar. I think what you're alluding to is that I say this all the time. That is the sugar that comes out of your blood at the time they draw the sample. I had a great example of this with a patient just this week. In 26 years of practicing medicine, I can honestly say I've never seen this amount of abnormality in a normal person, but I'm going to use him as an example because it's, I think, really, really telling. So this is a person who is extremely healthy. He's really fairly young, in his late 30s. He is a fitness instructor, so he works out like crazy. He also is trained as a nutrition. He has a nutrition degree from a college, and so he's also really well versed in how to eat well and healthfully. But he goes to get his annual health check that I sent him for, and it comes back that his fasting blood sugar was 140, which is extremely abnormal. That is diabetic levels, and it's extremely abnormal. And at the point in time they drew his blood, that was the glucose in his system. And yet his A1C, which is a measure of how much your blood sugar oscillates over the previous 3 months, his A1C was totally normal, no diabetes indicated. So it didn't even make sense. And not till I saw him and we had time to talk about what was going on, did we figure out how he arrived at such an abnormal fasting sugar. It turns out he has extreme anxiety with blood draws, and he ended up actually passing out.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
it was, yeah. So the blood draw was super duper stressful for him. And of course, what does the body do in a stressful situation? It floods the sugar into the blood to give you energy, evolutionarily speaking, to run away from the bear. So his blood sugar at the time of the blood draw was significantly elevated, but he doesn't have diabetes. When you look like further and investigate more, looking at the A1C, in a normal situation, his blood sugar stays stable all the time. His A1C was totally normal. It's just that he has that that severe of anxiety that his blood glucose showed up significantly abnormal. I thought that was really, really interesting. I will often see people's blood sugars be a little bit above normal in that kind of situation where people don't enjoy blood draws, but never have I seen it to the extent that his was. So that was a great lesson to me that, like, you know, again, you need to have the time to be able to talk to someone and figure out what's going on. If you're not always just your numbers, you know?
So how would he go about getting a normal blood draw
Well, we
ever?
talked
Because it's
about
like
that.
me, you know me, I'm the same. Like this guy,
Yeah,
well, I'm not that bad. I don't pass out, but I'm very anxious when I go get
right.
a blood
Well, so
draw. And that happens to
luckily,
me too. It's too high, a little bit too high.
so luckily in the arena of blood sugar, we have a different value, that hemoglobin A1C,
Yeah.
that is useful to help interpret, because it is demonstrating the stability of blood sugar, like I said, over the previous 3 months from when you draw that level. So luckily for blood sugar, we have a good way to monitor it without getting upset about his fasting blood sugar. Um, but it's not always possible to do a good job. If somebody is really anxious, you can also see blood gases being abnormal.
Oh,
Carbon
really?
dioxide, yeah, carbon dioxide, the gas that you normally breathe out. If you're holding your breath or considerably anxious when you do the blood draw, you could have elevated levels of that gas in the blood. So,
Interesting.
it really, it just deserves conversation to kind of like tease out, are we looking at a true disease state, or are we able to make sense of that another way?
Wow. That's really, I can't believe he passed out. That's worse than me. I haven't done that yet.
There's always, yeah, right? Yeah, it's hard for him. So we're going to try. I talked to him about, the possibility of doing it himself, if he would feel like, if he was in control of it and he could do a finger stick, he could test his blood sugar that way. That didn't seem like that was going to be a lot easier for him. He didn't think that that would be
Oh,
possible. But, so there's not always a workaround. But yeah, it can be super duper. Hard for people who have a lot of anxiety about blood draws.
yeah. And so the A1C is probably enough, do you think?
I do think it is for him. Yeah, I'm confident that um now I will say, because I see what a robust stress response he is able to have, I'm talking to him about, okay, does this happen at other times? I mean, because if it does, you're having moments where your blood sugar is, being really elevated, and your nervous system is super excited beyond kind of the normal range. So for people who have that with their everyday life, that's another issue that we're working on for him. And actually for him, we did do an adrenal panel, because I wanted to see where his cortisol levels are. And sure enough, while they're not disease state, they are high all day long. And he doesn't sleep. He has insomnia. So we're able to kind of, start to really dig down on what other things functionally are going on. He does not, by conventional standards, he would get a check and they would say, "You're great, you're healthy, all your numbers, all your levels are good." Maybe they would not have been able to make sense of the blood sugar, but his A1C, like I said, is normal. So it that's, I think, where naturopathic medicine is really, really valuable. At you're not in a disease state, but you're not optimally well. You're not balanced in some way.
Yeah. And you know how you have to fast for the blood sugar. Can that affect you too? Is fasting like that, not eating?
Well,
And
especially if
also, do you fast for another reason, or is it just for the blood sugar? I mean, for the other lab tests that you're taking, is there a reason to fast for those too?
Yes, the cholesterol test is the most accurate if you haven't eaten for at
Okay.
least 6 to 8 hours. So that's when you're doing wellness labs. I know what I'm seeing is a lot of doctors' offices where we are. I find will go ahead and draw people's blood even if they're not fasting. I think it's because, the follow through, the opportunity to get that person to have the blood draw is lost if they go home and then have to go back on a fasting um sample. But uh it's the most accurate for blood cholesterol and triglycerides and blood sugar to be fasting. Also, another cardiac lab that I do for some people is homocysteine, and that one also is most accurate if you're fasting.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. And what I like about you is you actually go through all of the results.
Thank
Like
you.
normally, when you go to a conventional doctor, they don't sit there and take the time to do that. They
It's
just send
super,
you a report that says, this is too high or this is too low. But
or
you
it's
go
all
through
normal.
every single thing. And half the
Yeah.
time, I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about. But you explain it really well because I'll go, what is that? And then you really explain it. So I like that you do that.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy that. I think once in a while I'll see people kind of start to glaze over and then I know I need to kind of speed it up. But, the Latin word docere, doctor, is means to teach. And I think it's really empowering for people to understand what we're looking at and what the blood work tells us or doesn't tell us. And yeah, so I enjoy the opportunity for um, really to involve people in their health and to have them understand what we're looking at, and to have it be more of a conversation and a relationship between doctor and patient rather than just here's your lab, do this, that's it.
Yeah, because it's very hard to understand why something would be high or low without an explanation, you know?
Right. And I think, when you feel that, also I think for some people having the rapport and being able to discuss and ask good questions and having time to ask questions and being invited to ask questions, that kind of environment, I'm hoping for most people, removes a barrier for them to continue to take good care of themselves. If you feel like you're going to go and nobody's going to listen to you anyway, to me, that's a barrier to get care. So I'm hoping that, where I'm meeting people, um, they're more willing and wanting to take good care of themselves.
Yeah. So, what lifestyle and dietary recommendations do you offer to promote overall wellness, longevity, and disease prevention?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Did you happen to see Netflix has a special called The Blue Zone? Have you
Oh,
watched
of
any of that?
course. I'm all about the blue zones.
Right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, when we look at people who are those 100-year plus, we find a lot of commonalities. And really, those are the foundations that I talk to people about. You need to eat lots of colorful foods, mostly plant-based or strongly plant-based, not a lot of artificial ingredients. We find that those people are moving. They might not even call it exercise, but maybe they're gardening, they're getting up and down, they're using their muscles, they're staying really strong. It's super important to stay strong to live long. And it's also important to exercise your heart and do cardiovascular. They're both types are important. The other things that I think are important is to find a way that speaks to you that you can exercise your calming nervous system. So whether for you that's prayer or meditation or yoga, you need to have, that aspect is a super important. Faith-based is, I think, what they highlight in that series. They call it
Yes, they do.
that's the element they call, and that seems to be a really important part, as well as what I call play, and again, you might not call it that, but being able to have fun in your life and to have things that you enjoy and pursuits that are not related to work or progress, just something that you enjoy, whether that's playing an instrument or playing a game, any of that. And then the last piece that I think is super important for people to stay healthy is connection, uh, to keep having good connections. We see people live the longest when they have strong social networks.
Yes, I highly agree with that. And so I was thinking the last time I saw you, you were talking about a study that was done about skin cancer prevention. Can you talk about that? That was really interesting.
Sure. I pulled up, I think that there are two studies that demonstrated this, but this is something that's near and dear to my heart because I have unfortunately had different types of skin cancer multiple times. And so, there, when you look at the research, until kind of recently, there really isn't a lot of out there that demonstrated any benefit for people who have just happened to either grow up in a climate where they suffered a lot of skin damage, or in my case, I sought it out in all of my younger years. I lifeguarded for years and years and years, and then was definitely someone who loved to just be in the sun, and didn't protect myself well enough. So suffered lots of skin damage. And it turns out they have come to find that a certain form of vitamin B3. So B3 is niacin, and the form of B3 nicotinamide has been found, I think, in at least two studies to be significantly helpful at preventing recurrence of basal cell and squamous cell type carcinomas. Um, I pulled up a meta-analysis, and basically the conclusion is that they did find significant benefit associated with taking nicotinamide, following patients in, I'm sorry, this meta-analysis says that there were 5 different trials, and that nicotinamide was associated with significant reduction in both basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma, and also with some precancerous lesions as well. So the dose that was studied was 500 milligrams twice a day of, like I said, this very specific form of B3 as nicotinamide.
And that's a supplement by itself. It's,
Yeah, you can find that easily available. The You just have to be careful that, niacin is something that's used in even conventional medicine to lower cholesterol. It has been something that we've used for a really long time, and niacin is B3. So there are different forms of B3, and this specific form is what you would look for, and it's nicotinamide. I don't know if you have a chat, or I can type it if you want somewhere.
I can put it in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So will this make you hot?
It's not a flushing form of niacin.
Okay.
Yeah. So great question. It's a
Yeah.
different form. And no, it does not cause flushing. And it
That's good.
doesn't, and also it's not a form that would be helpful for cholesterol because it's not got the same action. It's not the same actual form of that B3. It's a different form.
And so if you take a different B, like, I take the B healthy, you can take that along with it.
You can. B vitamins are water soluble. So for the most part, there's a very low toxicity, even if you're taking high amounts. There are a couple exceptions to that. So B6 can be neurotoxic if you're taking over 200 milligrams. That seems to be the threshold that you want to stay under for B6. But that is kind of the exception. Most of the B vitamins are tolerated in a high amount. And we use B vitamins to fuel the Krebs cycle, that pathway that every cell in the body uses to make ATP, which is energy, cellular energy chemically. And so if you're really active or really stressed, you use a lot of B vitamins. And so someone like that might need higher amounts than they're able to get through diet alone. And it can be really useful to supplement B as a B complex in general, or pulling certain B vitamins out and using them for specific conditions like skin cancer prevention or niacin for cholesterol.
So the B3, how long would it take maybe to kick in to where it's beneficial for you? Does it take a couple months?
For the skin cancer
Yeah.
you use, they followed people for 1 year in
Okay.
most of the studies, and at that mark they saw a significant decreased incidence of new skin cancers in the group that was taking the nicotinamide. So it's a forever thing if you have a skin cancer history. It's something that is working at preventing skin cells from mutating in a cancerous way. And so it's not a one and done, like you take it for a couple of months and you derive the benefit and you're done with it. It's something that if you have skin cancer, you're taking on an ongoing basis.
Okay. And since we're talking about supplements, can you talk a little bit about helpful supplements like magnesium or vitamin D?
Yes.
Three?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
So I think a good wellness plan for most people. So of course, for us, we live in the Pacific Northwest, and at our latitude, what is true is that the sun is never strong enough to activate vitamin D production in the skin at a optimal amount. So if you live here and you go outside, even in the summer, you're still not probably going to get enough sun exposure to manufacture vitamin D naturally as it's meant to happen in the body. Also, SPF even 8, so very low SPF sunscreen will block the ability of someone who lives at a more southern region to be able to make vitamin D. So even if you are in a place like Florida where you could get adequate sun exposure, if you're protecting your skin, which we all know now we should do, you're probably also not able to get vitamin D production through skin alone. So vitamin D is a great nutrient. There's a lot of epidemiology studies that show decreased risk of lots of different conditions. Breast cancer is a big one. The higher your vitamin D is, usually demonstrates lower incidence of breast cancer. So it's by far and away not the only thing that contributes to breast cancer, but it's something that we can control and is in favor of less incidence. Vitamin D is a good one. I think most people need at least a B complex to, like I said, give support for those energy cell pathways. I also love fish oil. That's one of my mainstays. Omega-3 fatty acids. Fish don't actually make, or I guess how I should say that is fish don't actually naturally have omega-3s. What happens is they eat up all the sea vegetables that are really rich in omega-3s. And then as a byproduct of that, fish fat becomes very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. So you can get omega-3 fatty acids from vegan sources like plant vegetables, but it's most commonly extracted from large ocean fish and that's a great anti-inflammatory nutrient. It's super helpful for cognitive protection. It's great for skin health. It's an anti-inflammatory thing. And that's another example of something that we just don't eat. You can eat heart healthy, but most people don't get the amount of fish through food alone that would give them therapeutic amounts of omega-3 fatty acids. So those are probably my top 3: D, a B complex, and fish oil.
Does the fish oil thin your blood?
Yeah, it does have an action of that. And so, of course, if you're on a blood thinner, you should definitely work with a healthcare practitioner to make sure that you're not getting too much blood thinning. And if you're bleeding easily, not clotting well, or bruising easily, and you're taking high doses of fish oil, that would also be an indication you might need to decrease the dose.
Interesting. What about magnesium?
Yeah, magnesium is another one of those nutrients that I think most people could use more of. And through supplementation, that's easy to do. Magnesium is found most rich in fruits and vegetables. And so, unless you're doing a stellar job of eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, you're not probably getting really robust amounts of magnesium through your diet. Then also alcohol depletes magnesium. Most Americans, are drinking alcohol, and that's another reason why you might have lower levels. And then again, stress and exertional output is going to utilize a lot of magnesium. So magnesium is something that can be really helpful for lots of different conditions. It unhinges the little muscle fibers in skeletal muscle and also smooth muscle. So it can help relax muscle fibers and keep them from being in spasm and hypertonic. It's also helpful at relaxing vessels. So it's good for things like headaches and migraines and high blood pressure. Um, and then it's a nutrient that we use also just for calming nervous system. So it's helpful at supporting healthy sleep and healthy mood.
Okay. What about calcium? And also, I can't remember how this works, but if you don't have enough calcium, your vitamin D won't,
Right. Both of
vitamin
those,
D, it won't work, or the other way around. I can't remember.
yeah, they're important and they work in concert. And so it's important to have adequate levels of calcium and vitamin D. Calcium, though, is one, well, as is vitamin D. They both have um, you don't want to overdo it with either vitamin D or calcium. The perfect way to measure the D is to be looking at blood levels. If that's affordable and available for people to do, that's a good way to see, if you're taking adequate D or not. But with calcium, we have a really nice roadmap from the amount of research and with the RDA. And so if you're a female person who is menstruating, you need 1,000 milligrams a day. And if you're menopausal or lactating, you need a little bit more, something like 1,200 milligrams a day. And most average Americans will get at least 300 milligrams from their diet. And that's from, a combination of all the food sources that you eat that can have a little bit of calcium in it. And then each serving of dairy, an ounce of cheese, a cup of yogurt has about 250 milligrams. So you add those together. Say you always have a cup of yogurt, that's 250 plus 300. So right there from food alone, you get 550. And the goal is to try to get to that recommended daily allowance of either 1,000 or 1,200. And you might need to supplement if you don't do multiple servings of dairy a day.
Yeah, or if you do no dairy a day,
Or if you do no dairy.
you're going to need supplementation. So I have just one more question. Maybe can you give us 5 wellness tips that you haven't talked about yet?
Okay, let's see. I think first and foremost, and this is a big one in the last 3 years because we've seen for a variety of reasons, I think people have gone without their wellness care. So my first one would be to look for a primary care provider that you feel like listens to you, resonates with you, that you can have conversation with, and that can help you navigate what wellness things are appropriate to look at. Then the second thing would be to know your numbers, know your blood pressure, know your cholesterol, be aware. It doesn't do us any good to, stick our head in the sand and not have those health checks. I know they're not what a lot of people love to do, but they are important. And I think, like you touched on before, sometimes depending on where you are, the availability of getting a health appointment can be really hard. We've
Yes.
had a huge departure of medical providers since the pandemic. And so visits are scheduled. We're in a time of medicine, which is just incredible. I've in my life of practicing medicine, I have never seen as much of a waiting period as we have now for different specialty appointments or even primary care appointments.
Or even blood panels. Trying
Yeah,
to get one of those now. It's
yeah, I'm
near
seeing
impossible.
slower turnaround time. And then, and then the other things that I think are important are um, balance, to be balancing. I don't think, this is obviously easier to say than to do, but I think we spend so much of our focus and priority and maybe even um, our ego is tied up in how productive we can be, how hard we can work, how much we can get done in a day. But I think it's important to balance that with rest and prioritizing enough time for sleep and getting restorative sleep, not drinking excessive alcohol that's disruptive to sleep. Um, and just having balance. And with that, the other things would be moving. You have to move your body. Um, it can't just be twice a week. It really, I mean, that's better than nothing. But if we want to stay strong and live long, it's got to be part of a daily thing. Heart health is 150 minutes a week of aerobic exercise. That's 30 minutes most days of the week to achieve good heart health.
Was there anything else you want to talk about in regards to heart health?
Oh, we were talking about lab values, and I would like to bring up that, we now have what I call the color TV version of heart health assessment. So if you're used to seeing heart health labs that are just cholesterol, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, and triglycerides, those are the normal four things that we look at in a lipid panel. That is a good start. It's a great, indication of how people are doing. But beyond that, especially if you have a family history of heart disease, there are a lot of other labs that can help guide treatment and give us a better indication of risk for people. And I don't know if I should mention brands, but I use a lab that is associated with the Cleveland Heart Clinic, and
Hmm.
they do a really nice job for patients who have, like I said, need that level of workup. Gives us the color TV version. So just so much more detail, looking at lipoprotein particle number. So not just the total number like you see on a cholesterol panel, but the particle number, the size of those particles, other elements like apolipoprotein B, which is an atherogenic protein that you can have levels of little lipoprotein little a, which is another indication risk factor of heart disease by itself. So I would encourage people to look into or talk to their doctors about whether it's appropriate to work that up and to find someone who can provide those types of panels in addition to the normal ones.
Is the reason that they don't perform these normally because it's expensive? Or you would think that, I
I
mean,
mean,
that
that is
sounds like everybody should get those types of
It's
labs,
true. Yeah. I think that is a big reason. And insurance, unfortunately, drives a lot of the medical decision-making process.
right?
Now, I can tell people, I think this is what's best for you to either take or to test, but ultimately, insurance companies get to decide how much of those things are covered. So we see people who, a good example is diabetes medication that insurance companies don't want to cover the cost of, even though it's medically necessary and the doctor is deciding, what treatment is best. It really comes down to what you can afford based on how your insurance covers the tests that are ordered or the drugs that are needed. So, yeah, I think a big barrier to having this be a universal practice is cost.
Yeah. So people take care of yourselves.
Right? Yeah.
Preventive medicine.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
So are there any other questions that I didn't ask that you could think of that you want to talk about today?
I think this is a good start to the conversation, really. Like I said, I think people should drop the idea of they are sick or they're healthy and think about wellness as a spectrum. And we always want to be doing things that are moving our ourselves to optimal wellness. And I don't mean to say that in a way that would assign blame to someone if they have a disease. I
Right.
don't mean it in that way. I want to be really careful about that. But, there's there are usually more things that we can do to help ourselves than just take a medication. And so, I mean, I am championing people finding healthcare providers that can help them focus on optimal wellness and move beyond that paradigm of just, I need to take a drug, and that is all that I do to improve my health.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, where can people find you? And I will include it in the show notes, but just in case
Oh, thank
nobody's reading the
you.
show notes, where can they find you?
I am in North Bend, Washington, and my private practice has been here since 2003. I have a website that is just my name, DrDiRienzo.com. No punctuation in the doctor, just DR and then my last name.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for finally coming on the show.
Thank you for being persistent. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm really happy to do this, and this was great. Hopefully there's been some useful information
Oh,
to
yeah.
your viewers, and yeah, like I said, kind of thinking outside the box of the conventional paradigm.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was really great having you. And I hope you have a great rest of the day. And I will see you next year.
Okay, you as
Okay.
well, Kim. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye-bye.